Every year, us at Smoobu, we gather the most important industry trends together, and we call them Smoobu Insights. And today, I'm super happy that I have our managing director, Jannik, with us to discuss how a host can become a better host. I'm your host, Jonas Baum, and I'm really happy to have you here today.
Happy to be here.
As we all notice, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. But our industry, the vacation rental industry, proves to be weirdly resilient. Why do you think that is?
So I think the beauty of our industry and why it's resilient is that, to sum it up very straightforward, is people always travel. So the fact that even though there is uncertainty and you have a lot of uncertainty either overseas or farther away, the resilience of the vacation industry is driven by a couple of factors. So on the one hand side, uncertainty usually brings also uncertainty in I have less disposable income, economy might be doing bad, and so on. But studies show, and the data is very clear, that even though consumer spending might be impacted by economic uncertainty or economic downturns, people always travel. And travel is the part of consumer spending that people will touch the last. That, on the other hand, also drives a lot of expectation on that travel, right? If you think about it, I have less money in my wallet, but I'm still going to spend the same amount on travel. My relative expectation on that travel rises.
What does that mean for hosts then?
So for hosts, there are good news and bad news, right? On the one hand side, demand is still going to be there. People are still going to travel, but those guests and those travelers will have higher expectations. So not just because of the general thing of the stay, but for them, it is, I'm spending more money on this from what I have, I expect more. And that means clearer standards, clean processes, good experience. And I'm really saying experience, not just nice and solid properties, but really the experience needs to be there. And that's the important part. And on the other hand, the advantage that we have in the vacation rental industry is you have a certain flexibility in destinations, I want to say. So even if you would think people that would normally travel abroad and might now say, I'm probably not going to travel abroad because economic uncertainty or political instability or whatsoever, they still have the ability to say, hey, I can still do all that in my own country. So the cool thing with vacation rentals is they're very interchangeable. Either you travel globally or regionally, but also you can stay in your own country. So that's the beauty of the vacation rental market. But the main thing is people always travel. And the vacation rental industry is, despite now everyone being in the bubble and it's all tech here and Airbnb there and all the other big new names out there, the industry is old as hell. Like renting out a room, that's nothing new. That's been there for centuries, right? But now we have a couple of more opportunities. So the market is very much maturing, and you can see that we're moving into that digital age. So you also have like a little revolution in that market. So that's why it's, I want to say, fortifying itself as well as an industry and as a market. So you on the one hand side, you have the economic stuff that you can say, hey, people will always travel. On the other hand side, the industry itself is reinventing and fortifying itself and just being better, and by this more resilient in a way that makes it just better economically from an internal point of view. So the businesses just run smoother, and by this are more resilient.
The industry trends that you have just been describing are quite demanding, especially for smaller hosts that maybe even run the vacation rental as a side hustle next to their regular jobs. Something that we very often describe as professionalization. Professionalization, however, can mean 1,000 things to 1,000 people. What is it that most people get wrong about professionalization? And what are things that you think are actually important when talking about professionalization, becoming more professional as a host?
Yeah, I would think especially the target you mentioned, or the type of host, right? A smaller host that's actually interested in running a vacation rental. I think the thing that a lot of people get wrong about professionalizing themselves is, in my opinion, it's more about a certain mindset and having an approach to how I run my vacation rental, and also how I run my vacation rental as a business, as opposed to I need to have the most professional tools and have everything figured out. That's not the case. I think it's about the mindset of wanting to learn and wanting to do better, and also optimizing and, for the lack of a better word, professionalizing yourself. That's the main thing. And a lot of people, in my opinion, also get it wrong when they sometimes enter the short-term rental market, in the sense that they say, I run my vacation rental as a passive income side hustle. That's not going to be the case. It's not a passive income thing. You will have to put active work in it. You can optimize a lot. You can save yourself a lot of headaches. You can save yourself a lot of times. You can make things better working as a business. But it's not going to be an ETF that just gives you the money without doing anything for it. And I think that is, again, a certain expectation mismatch that a lot of people that go into the industry have. And then once you actually think about it actively and say, I want to get better, I want to get more professional, you can think about, how can I do it? Can I save myself headaches? Can I automate the boring stuff? Can I save myself time? So get the essentials done first, and then you go into, okay, how can I now get a better hospitality experience? How can I grow? How can I make everything a bit more, increase margins and so on? So the business side and the hospitality side.
If we now take a look at average ratings, for instance, on Airbnb, smaller hosts actually, smaller and maybe even less professional hosts actually get better ratings. Like, is non-professional actually better? Do guests prefer staying with less professional hosts?
I think it's a tricky question. It's a very good question. Yes and no. Again, I want to say, especially if you look at reviews, what reviews tell you is, did the expectation that I have about that trip, rather than just the property, right? Really about that trip, match what I in the end got. And what I see that smaller hosts, or let's say hosts that have to take care of less properties, in the sense that they can give you much more personalized service or experience, are better in setting that expectations right and delivering on it. What does that mean? That means, for example, if I'm a host and I run 1, 2, 3 properties in, for example, I've been to Nice last year. Wonderful apartment in the old town of Nice. The photos were okay up to a point that they were professional, but you could see, hey, it's not the most fancy place that has the most modern furniture. Also not what I wanted, right? I wanted a good value for money, 1-bedroom apartment in Old Town Nice. Got exactly that. Super cool hosts, took care of me, were super responsive, great experience, overall nice. So they match this expectation that you have for it very well, which in the end gives me the feeling, okay, they actually overachieved it. I'm going to give it 5 stars. Whereas on the other hand, you have more professional than usually property managers or scaled up hosts. To keep this personal experience and expectation matching on point is really hard, because you're going to professionalize in a lot of the boring and admin stuff, and super professional photos really get the listing right, get the eyeballs on the properties, get the expectation really up, because they optimize for conversion on the booking. But to then match that expectations, or those expectations, is really hard. And that's usually the gap. The more you grow, that gap is harder and harder to close. And this is usually where the drift coming from smaller hosts having better reviews versus more professional hosts having worse reviews. It's not that the stays or the properties are better than one another. It's more the expectation gap on guests widens.
So what can more professional hosts with a larger portfolio who really do this as their core job do to still keep this personal experience alive?
So in my experience, and also when I talk to larger hosts or property managers, they need to be very conscious about creating that expectation and that experience at scale. So they the ones that are doing it really well know at which step of the experience in the end, so the travel experience, pre-booking, during the stay, post-booking, all of those things, they know very well how they appear and how they design that experience. They are very cautious in actually in not creating that gap that I mentioned before, right? So they are very conscious about the expectation I create with the images I put in there, with the listing, with the process, and so on and so forth, that this also matches what the guest gets, right? So it is less about being super personable and that you have a person handing over the keys and all of those things. That's not necessarily the key factor. It's just having a very smooth, very frictionless experience for the guests that matches what they also expect. So but you need to be very conscious about how to create it at scale, right? And especially what a lot of fast scaling hosts sometimes forget is still every single property needs to have a kind of a soul, even though it's much faster to just scale with I'm putting some very basic, super clean IKEA furniture in there and a couple of forks and whatever. It still needs to have kind of a soul, because in the end, every listing is unique to the person who's going to stay there, right? Even though I say I have 100 listings and one listing is only 1/100th of my portfolio, for the guest staying there, it's the one property where they're going to stay. So that one needs to land. And that's, I think, it's a very tricky part, but you need to be very conscious on how you scale.
So you as a guest, how do you determine soul? And what makes you feel this place has soul?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I've been thinking about
Let's
that.
Let's get
actually
a little tactical here.
Yeah, no, I like it, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit the last couple of months, because I've also stayed now at various different vacation rentals. Obviously, some of them Smoobu hosts, some of them hopefully soon Smoobu hosts, because I talked so much to them. So for me, how do I determine solo? Where do I actually want to stay, right? For me, it's if I can already see in the pictures that what's the vibe, for the lack of a better word, going to be. So if, for example, if I'm in a beach town, I would love to have at least a picture from a terrace to, if I have a view, show the view, not just show the apartment and there's a bed, there's a sofa, whatsoever. Show a bit of life in it. Usually you shouldn't put people in there. So it should be no people in the professional photos normally, but there should be a little bit of nice furniture, nice decorations, maybe even a set table and a couple of bottles of wine and empty glasses on the table, so you actually feel how you're going to live in there.
Avoid the lonely bottle of wine.
Yeah, not just for the sake of putting a bottle of wine there, right? But a set dinner table with plates and everything on it, nicely done, already gives you the feeling, hey, I'm going to be at home in there. So anything that makes you already feel right at home is better. And then, especially if I think about the actual stay, how can people make that happen? I want to know that it's thought through, that someone has been there and thought about someone staying there. And that means, my classic example, have freaking sharp knives in that apartment. You cannot imagine how many apartments I've seen where you don't have a knife that cuts anything. Like, you're sitting there and you can't cut anything because it's not there.
I always bring my own knives.
It gets tricky at the airport. So it's be conscious about the guests that come, right? If you're in a location where people normally travel in via flights or from not from the same country, have some small bottles of soap, dishwasher, shampoo, all of it in there, oil, salt and pepper. So if people arrive, there's already a certain stock there. And please do not have this big bottle of greasy oil in there that's there probably from the person before me, maybe not. Just very easy tip to everyone out there for all of these, I don't even know what they're called, right? If it's small shampoo bottles, make everything like small refillable stuff that your cleaners can in the end refill it for every guest. Doesn't cost you anything in the long run, but gives such a nice feeling. If you have nice little bit of olive oil, little bit of other veggie oil for cook, salt and pepper there in a very clean way that you already feel it's intended to be there, that already makes a lot of difference. So it's the small things. So hosts having thought about actually staying in that apartment and not just throwing it in there and say, hey, okay, do whatever.
So leveraging the vacation rental atmosphere, but with some hotelish perks
exactly
at the side. Okay. So you've mentioned a very important thing quite a few times already, which is the difference between price and value that increases even more, becomes even more important the less money people have in their pockets. So what's the one thing that you believe people get wrong about this all the time, and what should they do differently?
I don't think I have the perfect answer for this, but I think what a lot of people get wrong is they think every guest is the same and will act the same. So unfortunately, there will always be certain differences, right? Because we're dealing with humans here, and oftentimes hosts are very much on the cautious end and afraid that certain types of guests will behave a certain way or leave a bad review or something like that. Or on the other hand, that every guest is the same and they will love if you, I don't know, put the purple bed sheets there or something like super random stuff. I think you need to be prepared that you're dealing with humans and you will always have a certain range in terms of what guests want and expect. I think you can very much set a very good floor or like level on what everybody will need and want and expect, but there will always be a certain aspect of uncertainty, and some stuff you just can't calculate on. There might be a bad review because some person feels bad because the weather was bad or something like this, something out of your control.
A topic that we've been touching and discussing for quite a few times already is the relationship between price and value and how people perceive it. And you've told me previously that many hosts actually get this wrong. What's the things that hosts get wrong about this?
It's a very good point, and I think to put it a bit in perspective, I am probably going to use a quote that my economics professor in undergrad was the first thing any professor ever told our class at uni, and it was perception is reality. And I think it sums up wonderfully how you should think about pricing and how you price and advertise your vacation rental. Because in the end, it's always about relative value, about perceived value. People are very willing to get an expensive vacation rental, to get a cheap vacation rental, to get anything in the middle, as long as they feel they're getting the right value for it. So a lot of hosts just think about pricing as a function of what's the utilitarian value of, I have X square meters, I have one bedroom, and my neighbor prices it like that. So very straightforward, rational thought about it. And then they're afraid to either upprice it or downprice it, but I want to have an expensive or a cheap vacation rental or something like this. You should always think about what value do you offer your guests? It might be a super small apartment, but if it's in the city center, you can offer a lot of extra vibe or cool accessories or something like this, as long as people are willing to pay for it and the expectation or the experience in the end matches what they thought before, it's going to work. So you always need to think about not what's just the price in terms of that's a number that makes sense, but in the end, what value will people pin to it?
But with all due respect, costs at the same time also rise, right? Energy prices are surging. Operational staff is very hard to find and expensive. If you find them, what do you tell those people?
No, if costs go up, you just need to match it. People want to pay more.
Yeah, but the thing is, if your place is actually not looking like what it costs, but you have to take this amount of money because costs have just risen up to a certain amount. What do you do then?
Yes, you need to change your place. Then you're not doing a good job in matching value and expectation. Pretty straightforward. If you rent out a place that is subpar or, as you put it before, is a shithole and you want a lot of money for it, yes, if someone pays the price for it, you could argue it's worth it. But honestly, long-term strategy is match that expectation with the value. If you have a shitty apartment, you want to charge a lot of money for it, make it nicer. That doesn't mean you have to put in furniture for 20,000 euros in there, but it has to be clean, it has to be accessible, it has to be realistic. And the process of renting out the apartment, seeing it, feeling it through the pictures, it just needs to work. You don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on it, but just up the level a bit.
Okay. Big part of this, I believe, is identity. And we see that the majority of people who book a vacation rental by now is Generation Z or millennials. Those people, they don't buy just a vacation, they buy identity. At the same time, Gen Z and millennials book via the common OTAs, booking.com, Airbnb, and so on and so forth. How do you transport identity through those tiny windows that the OTAs offer you?
The first thing I always recommend, get a professional photographer. And with professional photographer, I don't mean just someone who brings a good camera and takes a couple of wide view shots.
Wide angle shots.
So just don't bring someone who has a very good camera and do some wide angle shots, right? You want someone who understands how to set the scene for your vacation rental. And the point you put is very good. How do I transport feelings and vibes through pictures? And you just need to be aware of first, who do I want to target and what vibe do I want to transfer, right? It's not about just vibes. Like if I'm renting out a mountain lodge, I don't want to see view on the street in front of me that leads me to a bus or whatever. I don't care. I want to see mountain scenery in there. Even if that's not the perfect direct view, right? But if I'm renting out a mountain lodge, I want to see at least a little bit of mountain view in there. I want to see that the place where I'm staying actually serves my purpose in terms of it's probably going to be cozy after a long day of hiking. If I'm going to be in a beach town, I want to have that shot, sunset, coffee on the terrace that gives me the view that the vacation rental has, right? You need to try to transport that feeling as if I'm there in that place and living the moments you want to have in that. And that is the coffee on the balcony in the morning in the beautiful beach town. That is the way up the mountain on the mountain lodge. That is a buzzing city center if I'm in Milano or something. So all of that. And you just consciously need to think about what do I want to transport. And have the clean shots, have the lively property, but also have these vibe shots that transport you into this is how the stay is going to be there.
Something that I believe many excellent hosts excel at is getting into the heads of their audience, knowing who is actually their ideal customer, and then knowing what the experience, the identity it is that this kind of customer is seeking. Most hosts I talk to struggle immensely with that. They don't even know who their ideal customer is. Do you have some tactics in mind what hosts can do to understand their guests better?
Very simple. Ask your guests, and not just in the review, because in the reviews, people are always going to focus on the wrong things. Shoot them a message afterwards. What is it that you really liked? Do you have something I could do better, or where you would have said, hey, that would have made my stay a little bit easier? Really simply ask.
Many hosts have, with all due respect, the fear that they might annoy their guests and that they don't want to answer. What would you tell them?
I would say that fear is usually unsubstantiated. You can ask questions. If you do it politely, if you do it post-booking and say, hey, it would help me as a host greatly and make the stay for future guests or yourself if you want to come back. People are selfish, right? If you tell them, hey, your next stay might be even better if you tell me what I can do better, People will answer. In worst case, they ignore you. They're not going to be mad if you ask them for feedback.
Are many hosts not great entrepreneurs?
I think it depends on which dimension you look at. I think so. What I see in hosting or the short-term rental world, that you have two parts of the short-term rental, the hosting part, that are usually or oftentimes hosts are better at one or the other. And the one part is running your vacation rental as a business, knowing how a funnel works, how to get eyeballs on my property, how do I optimize conversion, how do I make great operations work, how do I optimize my margins, how do I get a good channel mix to diversify my income and booking channels, how do I do accounting and all of those kind of things. So like run the business. And on the other side, you have vacation rental hospitality. So the hospitality aspect of it. How do I make guests welcome in my property? How do I make them love this? Have a little handwritten note. And that doesn't mean that you have to handwrite every note. Have a pre-printed template where you just drop the name in handwritten notes and sign it. You can do that en masse, put it in every property. Every guest will love it. Like that hospitality angle and that business angle, oftentimes what I see, there are very few hosts that put both together. But if you can make that happen, you're going to be a great entrepreneur or successful business person, however you want to call it.
Something that every entrepreneur has to deal with this way or another is external change. And something that we have seen change quite drastically is the booking window. It is now less than 7 days, I assume. What is something that hosts can do to adapt this? Is there maybe even a way to take advantage of this trend?
The booking window for less than 7 days goes, depending on which demographic or cohort you look at, between 1/4 and 1/3 of all the bookings. If we look at our annual report, the cohort we looked at, you have even 41% of bookings that happen within that short window. You put it very well in the sense that you need to adapt to change, but you also need to accept it first, right? You will not be able to change guest behavior.
I mean, every host hates it.
I know. I can very much understand, right? Even if you just abstract yourself from hosting even and just look at running a business, the first thing every business owner wants is planability. That goes about everything else. If I know what I will make in the next 3 years, that's much more important than having the uncertainty of doing 20% more. Every business owner that you will meet will tell you, I'd rather take 100% the next 5 years if I know that it's 100% going to happen, rather than the possibility of having 120 and potential of going down to 75. So planability is really important. But now with the booking window shortening, you just need to be prepared. That is the uncomfortable truth of it. You need to go back to the beginning of the conversation, professionalize yourself. You need to have solid operations in order to be able to serve that demand. And so there are two things I would recommend. On the one hand side is it's very simple, be ready. So you need to know that your operations can handle short notice bookings. And the other thing is if you really want to push that planability aspect of it, the certainty of having a booking, you of course can do a trade-off and say, hey, I want to incentivize people booking in advance. So you will need to work with discounts in the sense that I offer you a larger discount than I would usually do if you book 30, 60, 180 days in advance, because the security of it, the certainty of it, it's worth X% to me. So those are two very tangible things you can do. You just need to be conscious about what do you want to choose. Do you want to choose the uncertainty and being prepared for short notice bookings, or do you want to sacrifice margin for more certainty?
Let's say we favor certainty and are okay with a little lower margin. If the majority of your guests books via booking.com and Airbnb, how do I contact them again?
It's a very good question. I think it's one of the arguments of the short-term rental scene right now, right? OTAs versus direct booking, staying in control of your guests, those kind of things. So what you can do, you can always have a dialogue with your guests, right? You can't just, technically, you can't send links through or your direct booking website through the messages, but you can, of course, tell them, hey, either in the apartment, right? Have them, hey, by the way, next time you come, if you want 10% off, this is our direct booking website. Have a barcode there. Make it easily shareable. Make it easily accessible so they can either book directly for the next stay or they can share it with their friends, their family, whoever. So that is one way of staying in contact. And then you also have the contact details for them. Or you just let them know, hey, contact me afterwards. That's a way to contact us if you want a direct booking. That also works. It's not easy, but you should try to get ahead and stay in charge of the relationship you have with your guests.
Mm-hmm. A major shift next to people booking with shorter booking windows is AI. And now we see that still the absolute majority of people books via the common OTAs. But people also more and more book via and search for vacation rentals with ChatGPT, with Claude. What can hosts do to show up in those results?
Yeah, I think so. I have a very distinct opinion about the whole AI topic in the industry, especially after attending a lot of events the last couple of weeks with hosts, with operators, with the tech folks of it. I think people completely overestimate how operators and hosts and guests use AI or can use AI and underestimate what it can actually do. So what do I mean with that? I think we're very far away from I'm using an agent to like literally book the one vacation rental where I'm going to stay and book my travels. Very far. Right now, across the globe, more than half of all the bookings or travels are booked offline still. Like literally via phone calls, driving through, shooting an email to the person I know, whatever. Like they're not online direct bookings. So
but doesn't that mean that maybe the agent that you're talking to will use AI just to make their jobs a little easier, which then results in the same question?
That, yes. So I think operators and the AI running behind the scenes, yes. I just don't think that guests are going to use it up to a point where I'm going to say, hey, everything is going to be booked via the agent. How do I get found on the search engine? So usually how the travel search now works with AI, with LLMs, is I'm more or less trying to find a destination and then afterwards trying to find stays. So the usual flow is still I find inspiration, I want to know where I'm going, and then I'm probably still going to link out to find different accommodations. And other than that, do your research in the end if you really want to get mentioned in the generative engine search. GEO, so generative engine optimization, is still very similar, not the same, to classic SEO, search engine optimization. So do your research on what you can do to optimize your direct booking website or your own brand for it. And that is currently the best thing you can do with okay amount of effort, I want to say, that actually brings you a good return on time invest.
The other day I've heard that LLMs such as ChatGPT or Claude actually love press articles. So should every host just try and get into PR right now?
It certainly doesn't hurt. I think it's always the question of, is the effort worth the outcome in the end? Frankly, I don't know. So I'm also going to admit I'm not the utmost expert on how to optimize your vacation rental for LLM findability. But the question you always need to tell yourself, and that every business owner needs to ask himself very openly, is I have a limited amount of time and resources. And is that aka getting press releases for the 3 people that are going to search, can I find a 1-bedroom property in the middle of town X? Because that is then if you're going to be mentioned per se. Otherwise, the answer is still going to be, here's a list of sites where you can book different properties. Is investing in that super tiny part of the funnel where I should invest my time and resources as opposed to doing a lot of other stuff? Probably not.
Any last thoughts about how AI changes our industry in total? There's a lot of doomsday scenarios on the one end. There is also a lot of optimism on the other end. There is people that will say we'll have agents that will run and manage your vacation rental end to end, which I find hard to imagine considering the biggest part is cleaning the apartment.
Yep.
But still, on the other end, there's people that say nothing will change and the industry will stay the same as it has been forever. What's your take on this?
I think it depends on how you will define change, right? So will the industry still be, I go somewhere, I sleep in a vacation rental? Yes. But that has been there before the internet, that has been there with the internet, that has been with there when Airbnb came up, and so on. So the essence of it is not going to change. The thing we consume is still the night in a vacation rental. So that is 100% going to stay the same, because otherwise, like, the agent can't sleep in that vacation rental for me, right? AI won't do the travel for me. But what I think is going to change is how people, and with people I mean guests as well as hosts, right, act in that industry. So the beauty of AI is that you by now can, in a semantic, in a language way, make software or tech work for you. So whereas previously I've had to go into a software, try to find out how I use the software, set up a website for myself, click around, educate myself, spend a lot of time on this, AI will make your life a lot easier in the sense of you can talk to it. You don't have to say, yeah, this is a guide where I put that button and then I'm going to try to adjust this picture and blah, blah, blah. But you can just tell or ask AI, hey, change my pictures, make that happen, make my website better, more blue, whatever. So there's the ease of use across the board, may it be during booking vacation rentals, finding information, spreading information, managing your vacation rentals, also especially on the tech side, it will just be easier and smoother. And that either leads to people having more time or people being able to scale faster and have higher margins. So I think that is, per se, AI for our industry is very positive. It can remove loads of friction that is currently still there.
Moving a little away from AI and again back into the guest experience. We see our top hosts use OTAs more like a discovery engine and less like a booking engine. Walk us through the perfect path from a guest's perspective that you're seeing from seeing a listing on Airbnb or booking to actually becoming a repeat guest and even in best way possible an ambassador for your vacation rental.
Yeah, so it's a fair question and one I talk about quite often when I meet hosts, like how can you make this happen or how can you make use of the OTA discovery engine? I think that the first point I want to make also with, generally I have a finance background, right? And the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, I think holds very true also for channels and online distribution of your vacation rental, right? Don't be super anti-OTA, right? They have a reason to be there and just look at them as marketing costs. Like you named it discovery engine, I would name it just like it's a marketing channel, right? They do the marketing for you. You pay 15% or whatever commission they want to take from you. And it's a fair game. If you don't want to play it, you don't have to. But so from a guest's point of view, I imagine I just been in Portugal. I was there for a short trip. I discovered in the area. I booked via one of the major OTAs. I had a very good experience. The communication, the hosting, the property, everything was top notch. And what I loved about this, they really thought the whole experience through, right? As you mentioned it, right? How can I become a repeat guest or an ambassador? So the moment I arrived in that room, I had the little handwritten note there. It was pre-printed for the template, but my name and like a little thing with a voucher and saying, hey, welcome Jannik, super happy to have you. By the way, if you want to come back, here's 10% off of your next stay. Now, the one tip I also gave them was add a little barcode on it. So you want to make it easier, technically accessible. Not only, hey, I then have to go to the direct booking website and ask them, by the way, that's my code you mentioned, but have it in there, have it shareable. So what you would want to do, feel free to get the people from the OTAs in, but then very consciously get in charge of that relationship. Try to get that contact data while they're in the property, in the rental. Try to put them in your CRM. Try to make your direct booking website very accessible for them and very shareable. So it might not be that they have to come back themselves, but making it shareable because they just have a nice experience is very real, right? Imagine if you have 2 properties, you have 365 days maintenance, whatever, then you probably have like 340 bookable per year. That's only so many stays. If I have a super nice experience and I can immediately share the link to that apartment in one group with friends and my family group and whatsoever, like that, you have 50 new eyeballs on it and potentially one of them will book, and that's for free. So really create those experiences, and especially if you have those nice hospitality experiences, you can use those to make them, rightfully as you put it, your ambassador. Use your guests to make the marketing for you. I think that is also the best marketing you will get.
I mean, sounds very easy, I think very hard to do. If I was a host, just starting off into the business, I'm working full-time and start with hosting because I love the hospitality part of it. What are 3 things that I should prioritize first?
It's a good point, especially if you love the hospitality point of view. You probably want to take care of the business side first. So always go for the stuff that you feel a little bit uncomfortable doing because it's probably the one you neglected a bit. So the first things you should do is take care of the basics. So, and what do I mean with this? Ensure there can be no major fuck-ups or no hardcore pain points that could really slow you down, cost you a lot of time, or screw up your business in any kind of way. There are, for example, things like really get in charge of your calendar, and if you list on several channels, syncing your channels, have the availabilities rightfully set. You don't need to start playing around with prices and having all of the advanced stuff. Get the basics right, make sure you have it all properly set, and then start automating the stuff that costs you a lot of time. For example, messaging. Start setting up the first automated messaging, the first auto replies, the first messages that people get pre-booking, post-booking, and so on. That will save you a lot of time. Again, that doesn't have to be the most advanced part already. Just get the basic stuff first to a certain degree. Effectiveness over efficiency. That's what I like to say. So if you think about first, get all that stuff in order, then you can think about, okay, now I can take care a bit more of the guest experience. For example, I can make it a bit more frictionless. I can get a digital guest guide. I can tell them a bit more stuff. I can dive a bit more into the hospitality aspect of it. And by this, you again raise this guest experience and you can get that positive flywheel also going, right? The guest experience, they will leave you good reviews, which in the end are a positive signal for new guests, or they recommend you and those kind of things. And Once you have done that, then you can start thinking about, okay, how can I actually optimize the business side, the margin side of things maybe? And that is when you think about, for example, setting up a direct booking site. And there again, effectiveness over efficiency. Don't spend 5 weeks on trying to design the perfect direct booking website. Rather get it done first, and then you can still iteratively optimize on it, right? First, get something out there. If it works, it works. But if you wait for 5 weeks, there was 5 weeks in between where you didn't have a direct booking website. So rather first have a basic one and then move to advance than over-engineering anything. But I think the one thing that hosts need to take care of, get the boring stuff done first. Don't lose yourself in all the amenities and super hospitality and everything. As long as you don't have your basics covered, you're not set.
Thank you so much for the conversation so far. Let's do a very quick fire round. I'll just pose you a question and you got 1 minute to answer. So name one thing that most hosts think is very important, which simply isn't.
Maybe let me rephrase that a bit, because there's a lot of buzz and conversations always about how do I increase direct bookings, how do I get more independent of OTAs, and that paints the picture of OTA as the enemy. I don't think that's necessarily true. I do think they have a very solid reason to be there. And as I mentioned before, right, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So having different channels and managing them actively is very important. Yes, of course, from a margin perspective, having more direct bookings, it's better. But from a diversification point of view, having more channels that are not necessarily equally, but you want to diversify at least a bit. Plus, the big OTAs literally spend billions upon billions of dollars in marketing to get guests into your property. Use that. You cannot compete with that necessarily. So why not make use of it as much as you want to or should from a diversification point of view? I think don't think OTAs are the enemy is the one thing that's often a bit wrong in these days.
What is something that Smoobu should have actually done 2 years ago, which it hasn't done already?
And especially from a personal point of view, investing more in what we call community. So connecting more with hosts physically and also digitally, but trying to build up that community for hosts where they can actually meet and talk to each other without us necessarily as the intermediary, but rather create a space where hosts can also help themselves and just exchange ideas. Because the wonderful things I've seen is that hosting oftentimes is a very lonely business, because it's not like I have a company, I go to work and I meet all my colleagues. For many hosts, it's a side business and they don't know any other hosts. So for them, it's always also an emotional struggle in building that up. But the moment you create a space for hosts to meet, it's super interesting how engaged everybody is out of the sudden and how happy they are also to meet people who are doing the same thing. To, like, in German, you say Leidensgenossen, which is a bit the bad side of things. But if you want to phrase it positively, who are people who are also on the same ship, which is, it's very nice to see. So that community aspect, we started a bit now more in Germany, but also want to build that a bit more globally. I think it's the right direction to go, and would have done it earlier, because it's very nice to see, and I think it's also very good for the overall vacation rental community.
In those direct conversations with hosts, what's the one thing that you learn that you cannot learn from numbers data?
I think it varies quite a bit, actually, from host to host. I think me personally, what I can learn is there are different types of hosts out there. There are people who are perfectly happy with just managing their 1, 2, 3 properties and want to do it properly, want to automate as much as they can to then dive a bit more into that hospitality aspect because they like it. And there are people out there that really want to scale and make it their business and are very driven, I want to say. And to know the differences and what is important for each of that segment, it's really interesting. And I think it's very hard if you never talk to those hosts or to the different types of hosts, and best case at the same time. Then it gets very interesting because they have totally different problems and interests. That is very hard to get if you do not engage, and especially if you do not engage in person sometimes.
Last one. What's a piece of conventional vacation rental wisdom that is simply plain wrong?
Tough question. I think I think that's a good one because we talked so much about perceived value and expectation. Your place doesn't have to be expensive or fancy to be a good business. It just needs to have a good value for money ratio.
That's, I think, a perfect closing sentence. Thank you so much for today's conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
So if you enjoyed this conversation and want to dig deeper into the data that we've been discussing, comment Insights for the full report.